Alrighty, we're on Unit 5, Notes 5, Other Rules and Equations. So, this is the last set of notes on building up to what equations are. We started from the beginning from where do equations come from. We did one-step equations, two-step equations, we added negatives to our equations, and with these rules on fractions and distributive property, we're going to know everything we need to basically solve any basic equation that comes our way. There will be a summative after these notes, and I want to make sure you're totally confident with everything we've done so far before you take that summative. Now, I know you're pretty confident with distributive property. A lot of our time in these notes are actually going to be spent with fractions. And if you don't remember everything about fractions, that's totally fine. But I want you to be like 200% confident before you move on to the back of these notes. If you are struggling with any part of what I go over, please let me know. Please find practice. I want you to make sure you're set with this before you move on. Because building a solid foundation is what's going to give you success in later sections. Okay, so these notes contain rules on fractions and distributive property. It will help a lot if you can remember how to manipulate fractions. If not, that's fine. However, make sure you are confident with this review before moving on to the notes below. If you need help, let me know. There's also always fractions practice available. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is multiplying fractions. I'm going to demonstrate this once, and then I want you to do these 3 practice examples before moving on to division. So, it's like one easy step. I promise you can get this. To multiply fractions, literally all I do is multiply the top together. I just multiply the top together, and then I multiply the bottom together. So, I'm going to multiply 5 times 6. That will give me 30. And on the bottom, I'm going to do 12 times 3. That gives me 36. When I multiply 5 over 12 times 6 over 3, I end up with 30 over 36. Okay, I want you to pause and see if you can do that exact same process to these other 3 fractions. Multiply the top and multiply the bottom. Once you unpause, you'll see my answers and see if you're right. Okay, did you get it? My answers were 4 over 15, 35 over 12, and 60 over 16. If you didn't get these, please tell me. Please do practice. I want to make sure you get it down before you keep going, because it's only going to get harder from here. Okay, moving on to dividing fractions. This process is almost as easy as multiplication. Basically, you just flip the second number. So, we have 3 over 4 divided by 1 half. Well, to multiply, I keep the same 3 over 4. I switch my sign, so now it's going to be multiplication. And my 1 half here, I'm going to flip it to become 2 over 1. These two are the same. I have flipped this from division to multiplying my reciprocal. Anyway, now that I'm here, I'm going to multiply over the top just like I did before. I have 3 times 2 equals 6. And on the bottom, I have 4 times 1 equals 4. I divided my fractions, and now I wound up with 6 over 4. You keep the first number, change the sign, flip the second number. Multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom, and you're good. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and try dividing these next 3 fractions. Remember, change the sign, flip the number, multiply the top, multiply the bottom. If you get these 3, you can move along. You'll see my answers in a second. Okay, my answers for this are 4 over 12, 15 over 14, and 10 over 5. Once again, if you didn't get these, please tell me, and I'm happy to give you more practice. Okay, the last skill you need to recall is multiplying whole numbers and fractions. This one's also pretty easy. When you multiply a whole number and fraction, you're going to do a multiplication and then a division. You're going to move this, in this case, in this example, you're going to move this 4 on top of the fraction, multiply it by what's on top, in this case 1, and then divide by the bottom, giving me 2. 4 times 1 half is 2. And that's true because half of 4 is 2. Half of 4 is 2, right? Okay, I'll do one more example, then I want you to try the last two. So, 6 times 3 over 9. I move my 6 on top. 6 times 3 is going to give me 18. I'm going to have 18 over 9. Okay, 18 divided by 9 is 2. So my answer is once again 2. Go ahead and do these last two practice. Pause, and you can check your answers in a moment. Okay. Your first answer should be 6, and your second answer should be 10. If you got these right, you can go ahead and move down to the notes at the bottom. If you need more help, please let me know. Okay, let's go to fraction coefficients. We're going to be throwing fractions into our equations. Remember that a coefficient is the number in front of x. Sometimes that number can be a fraction. Do we treat it any differently than if it was a whole number? No, of course not. We do the exact same thing we were doing before. Divide that number on both sides. No matter what the number is in front of the x, we still divide it out. Okay, so we have an example here. We have 3 over 2 times x. I need to get rid of that 3 over 2 to get x by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 3 over 2. So I'm going to put my division symbol and 3 over 2 here. And when I do that, of course, division cancels out multiplication. This whole thing goes away on the left side. And I'm left with x. However, since I divided by 3 over 2 on the left, I have to do the exact same thing on the right. Divide by 3 over 2. Now what we learned up above is that when we divide by a fraction, we actually multiply by its opposite, by its flip. So I have x equals 12 times, I'm going to flip this to be 2 over 3. Now that I'm here, I'm going to put the 12 on top, multiply it by the 2. X equals 24 over 3. And when I divide 24 by 3, I find that x equals 8. Okay, so I divided by 3 over 2 on the left, divided by 3 over 2 on the right. That means I change it to multiplication and flip the fraction. Then I move my 12 on top, multiply it, and then divide by 3. I'm going to do the same thing in the second question. I divide, because this is 2 over 5 times x, I divide both sides by 2 over 5. That cancels out here, but I have to divide on my right as well. 2 over 5. I bring my x down, and when I bring this down, I'm going to switch it to multiply 5 over 2. I put my 8 on top, times 5 is 40. And 40 divided by 2 is 20. Okay, so now we're going to start seeing more steps. Now, this isn't too bad. We're still doing the exact same things we were seeing before. Just whenever you have this fraction, you're going to do the process we've been going over. So, I'm going to start by getting rid of this 5 by subtracting 5 from both sides. That leaves me with 1/4 x equals 7. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 1/4. And when I bring down my x, so that's going to cancel out my 1/4, I'm going to bring down my x. X equals 7 times 4 over 1. Now I'm going to make sure I give myself some more room. I'm going to bring it back up. When I multiply my 7 times by 4, I get x equals 4 times 7 is 28 over 1. And when I divide by 1, of course, I just end up with the same number. So x equals 28. Remember, my process is always the same. I divide by a fraction on both sides. So when I divide by that fraction on the right, I turn it into multiplication and I flip it. And then I just solve it out. So once you're confident, you can move on to the checking understanding. You may need to use scratch paper for this. Work slowly. I want you to be confident in your answers. And as always, if you have any questions, please tell me. Okay, let's go to the back. Okay, we're going to briefly talk about distributive property as well, because it is something you need to know for equations. We've used distributive property a few times through the year already, and it's coming back in equations. Make sure you remember how to use this property. So, I want you to go ahead and try to solve these, simplify these four expressions. If you can do it, great. I'm going to walk through it in a moment. Okay, so in all of these cases, I distribute the number on the outside of the parentheses into the parentheses and multiply everything inside. So I multiply 3 times x, then I bring down my plus, I do 3 times 5, 15. When I have a negative number, I need to make sure this negative stays with my 4. I multiply negative 4 in with x, I get negative 4x. And when I multiply this negative 4, this is also a negative 4 here. Negative 4 times negative 4 is going to be plus positive 16. When I distribute a number into an x that already has a number with it, I multiply the 5 and the 2. This 5 and 2 gives me 10x. I multiply the 5 and the number in front of my x. I also multiply in my 5 with the 4. So I end up with 10x plus 20. Lastly, I do as much distribution as there are numbers inside my parentheses. So this 2 is going to go to everything inside these parentheses. So 2 times 2 is 4. I get 4x. I get 2 times 6 is 12. And then 2 times 10 is 20. Okay, let's look at the distributive property in equations. Just like before, the distributive property mainly makes certain problems easier. It's mostly just another tool to keep in your toolkit. Let's look at one kind of equation. This guy. We've done this before, but previously we divided both sides by negative 3. We can also distribute it. We could divide out the negative 3 like normal, but that would make us flip our negative signs a bunch of times. Distributing might make it easier for us to keep our work together. Regardless of whether we divide out the 3 or distribute, we will get the same answer. Now let me show you. Here on the left, I'm going to go ahead and distribute. I multiply my negative 3 in to both of these numbers. Negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. And when I multiply this negative 3 times negative x, I get plus x, plus 3x. I apologize. I get a plus 3x. Once I'm there, I solve it like normal. I add 12 to both sides, add 12 to both sides. 3x equals 48. And I can divide both sides by 3. Sorry, I'll do this work in a better space. I can divide both sides by 3. And find that x is equal to 16. That's one method. Gotta keep my work clean. I can also just try to solve it normally. If I do that, I have to keep track of my negative signs a lot more. Okay, then I have to subtract the negative 4 out. There's so many ways to make a mistake. I have negative x equals negative 16. I have to make sure I cancel out my negatives to be positive x equals positive 16. Both of these methods work, and that's what I want you to show in this checking understanding below. But when you do the distributive property, sometimes it's easier for the signs. Sometimes it's easier for the signs. Sometimes it's the only way to solve a problem. Some questions might also ask you just to show how to do the distributive property. Either way, I want you to make sure you know how to use it. So when you see a question, when you see a question, you might remember that the distributive property is one of many ways to solve. So go ahead and try the checking understanding. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and thank you very much. Have a good day.